you, everybody, for tuning in. We have just a quick introduction before we get started. I'm Bob Graff, Vice President of Operations Group at Market Vision. And we've got today Ben DeSeingold, our internal counsel and resident AI expert, with us today. So it's been a little while since we provided an update for the industry on sort of our point of view, Ben. Ben's been very active in this space with different industry associations over the last year, different conferences, specifically with some things changing. So I wanted to get your perspective as we wrap up last year and kind of think about the year ahead.
Yeah, I'll just add, it's been a while since we've done a video, but we've been beating the pavement on conferences. So people probably have seen me give some of the spiel somewhere around the country in the last year.
It's been a good year for that, but things are happening really quickly. So, all right, I just put together a few questions. I think we'll just walk through those, get your point of view on where we are, and we'll share this out. Hopefully, it's informative for people. Hopefully, it provides some context to others, and other people can digest it, see if it's in line with what they're thinking, what they're experiencing, what kind of things we think the next year will bring, which should be an interesting
year. That sounds great.
Last year was obviously an interesting year. I think you and I were talking about the last video update. May have been a year ago, or maybe slightly short of that. It's a lot of time, long time in AI. I mean, tons has happened. We've had a lot of meetings, as you know, internally and with clients and partners, and a lot to understand. AI has clearly won the year, and it's everything everybody's talking about going into 2026. So it's having its moments. So how would you assess the sort of where we are now, either relative to a year ago or just how things have evolved versus what you thought it would be, including more recently?
I think we're moving along slower than AI people originally predicted, right? I think a year ago, we were all talking like this was a transition that could be accomplished in 12 or 24 months. And you don't hear that very much anymore, right? You hear more of a bigger organization, you probably need 3 to 5 years. Small organization, maybe 1 to 2. But I think timelines are getting more realistic. I think that for a long time, the narrative has really outpaced reality. But now we've reached a weird point where the narrative continues to outpace reality, but reality is also outpacing what sort of the average potential user of these tools feels about them. We're at a point now where if all development stopped, if OpenAI and Anthropic and Google and Meta, if all the major players just stop and say what you have is it, it's still enough for a lot of change in the business arena, probably enough for transformational change. So I think that some of the kind of marketing shine on things has started to go away, but fortunately, it's allowed people to be, I think, a little bit more realistic and less just driven by optimism and sort of hope for what it might be. We've moved squarely into what can I do today phase, which is healthy. Don't get me wrong, but it is an odd cycle that we don't really see most of the time with business technology or general purpose technology, where we've got hype running so far ahead, but then average perception lagging so far behind. Which it's a strange phenomena, but the good news is that no one is stopping, right? There's a lot of talk about whether we're in a bubble. And I think that in terms of infrastructure spend and in terms of the capital expenditures of the NVIDIAs of the world, we probably are, right? You can't spend indefinitely. At a certain point, if everyone has access to these tools, you can't get any more money. But I don't think we're in a technological bubble where the models continue to improve. Every year, there are people saying, oh, they've plateaued, we're going to be stuck here. And then they don't. They incrementally or transformationally improve. We just saw Gemini, which is the main model that we use at Market Vision, dramatically improved, both in terms of its general capability and its ability to generate images with Nano Banana. We're starting to see that some of the ideas that we've had too were wrong, right? The last 6 months ago to maybe a year before that, there was a lot of talk about, well, there's no more data to train the models. So obviously the models aren't going to get better. And if we train the models with synthetic data, they'll collapse. And none of that has really come true. So I think in terms of the macro environment, it's starting to settle. Um, the major players have pretty well defined roles now. Notably, I would say the role of Anthropic is to come up with new infrastructural concepts and then share them with everybody. The first of those was MCP, Model Context Protocol, which is how any AI tool connects to other platforms. So if you connect your Claude or your ChatGPT to Google Drive, that connection is something that Anthropic just gave everyone for free. And when they do this, everyone seems to adopt it. More recently, they released skills, which essentially train your instance of Claude to do something that it ordinarily wouldn't be able to do by creating a little Python package that it can call on. And just last week, OpenAI said, well, we're going to adopt that too. So everyone's leapfrogging each other, but they're also helping each other leapfrog each other, which is a very weird sort of collaborative type of competition that we don't see a lot of the time.
Yeah, yeah. It feels a little bit like the Wild West, but it feels like any new tech in a little bit. But this is on sort of on warp speed, steroids, however you want to describe it,
It is.
of how fast it's moving. Feels like it's how they're defining themselves.
It is,
Or
but at the same
differentiating themselves
time,
in the marketplace a little bit different this time.
it's accelerating day to day, but the sort of what the non-technical experts, so that the AI people who are not engineers, um, the what we're hearing has started to coalesce to where I attend a lot of webinars, I read a lot of articles, I watch a lot of videos to make sure that what I'm saying and how I'm thinking about it, that nobody has come up with something that I need to be incorporating or that changes the way I take a position on something. And the narrative in that world has really started to solidify, where I'm not hearing a lot of rogue ideas anymore. Everyone is kind of on the same page, and there are some disputes about how a specific industry should react or how they should strategically move forward. In the legal world, there's a big debate right now over whether, if you use the legal specific tools, are the tool providers eventually going to try and compete with you and become firms? But aside from that, the kind of what is possible, what capabilities exist, what capabilities are going to exist soon, what should you be doing and how should you be doing it, has really started to solidify, where there's not a lot of variation, which in research, low variation wouldn't be a good thing. But in this case, I think a consistent story from every expert is much healthier than what we had a year or 2 years ago.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I think the beginning of the year was, or beginning of last year, we were still very much in the hype phase, big time hype phase, but with some practical things happening. But now I think we'll get a little more practical. We're all using it in different ways. We're getting better for certain things, looking at opportunities for others. But it's been an interesting 12 months for sure. We know in our groups that we meet with regularly that some people are making more progress than others, or their solutions at least seem to be going in one direction more, maybe a more obvious use case pops up. In terms of the use cases for this year coming at the end of 2026 or just moving forward, what's leading at this point for you? What do you think is leading the way? And we could talk about how we integrate these things with this or that or experiment with that, but which ones have really kind of taken hold for the insights industry so far?
Yeah, I'm gonna start with saying what I hope 2026 looks like before what I think it actually will. I'm hoping that what we see is a transition from this sort of my role is X, therefore my use cases are A, B, and C, to my personal pain points are X, Y, and Z. Therefore, I'm going to use the tools that I have access to in the following ways, because not everyone has the same bottlenecks in their personal effort. Um, a really easy example is that I'm a very fast editor, but I'm a very slow writer. So if I'm given something to react to, I know immediately what I don't like about it, and I can change it. But if I'm starting there, just sort of sitting in contemplation at my desk, thinking about what to say, I'm going to be spinning my wheels for quite a while. There are plenty of other people with the opposite problem, right? They're really fast writers, but then they sit and deliberate and struggle over the editing for a really long time. And we're now at a point where neither is really a weakness. Neither one really needs to slow you down because we have a tool that you can say, hey, here's what I'm trying to get across. I feel like I'm not quite doing it. Can you make some recommendations? And I think we all wish that we had the time to do that with colleagues on everything that's important. Hey, can you give me a few thoughts on this before I send it out? But we don't have time, in part because everyone's got a lot on their plate, and B, because whoever you would send it to for advice, they've also got a lot on their plate. So just that alone, I think these very basic problems are still tremendously unsolved. A lot of tech companies are talking about, oh, well, the baseline is everyone saves 10-20% of time. Everyone is 20% more efficient or more productive. Mm-hmm. And like, okay, well, can you give me examples of companies that have pulled that off and where it's quantifiably true that they've pulled it off? And then suddenly we don't have a whole lot of examples. Yep. But I think that's still maybe not a low-hanging fruit, but that's still the sort of first stop on the road. And I really think that we should be making that stop before proceeding to more complete overhauls of process. A lot of this conversation is people saying, oh, well, legacy processes are broken. We need to evolve them. Well, some of them might be, but not all of them, right? Not everything that existed pre-AI is bad, and we don't need to overhaul every process that we use to operate a business. Mm-hmm. So parsing through that and figuring out where the value actually is, I'm hoping that not just our industry, but that the broader world of business is going to hit that milestone and move past it in 2026. For us, I think that in the insights industry, there's a lot of fear about this technology. I think it feels like a much more existential threat than it really is, because when we're talking about the basic things that these tools can do, analysis, communication, business writing, are top of the list. And well, that's what we bring to the table as researchers. But it's not the only thing we bring to the table as researchers. And I think coming to terms with what the critical expenses of time are, and what if you had, I always use the infinite interns analogy, but if you had infinite interns, what would you hand off to them and what would you keep for yourself? And I think a lot of people are still struggling with that because it's not necessarily a department level decision. It's more of a personal level decision. And that is part of the reason that I think that the timelines were so wrong at the beginning. And everyone thought this was going to be a pretty quick process. And now that's obviously been proven untrue. Industry specific, I think that we have more companies than we need, where there are a lot of tool providers who provide a very specific tool. And that tool often has been built to some degree with the AI that is then operating the tool. But an increasing part of the conversation is that if you can build it with AI, I can also build it with AI. And even more than that, if you can build it with AI, the actual developers can see exactly what you want and then build it not with AI. So I think we're open to this sort of anything you build can be my prototype kind of a mentality that I'm not sure how we're going to resolve that. I'm not sure how that's going to shake out, but it could be that small companies thrive, right? And we have 3-person tech platforms who have a large handful of really dedicated clients, and that keeps them going, which is that's a fine outcome. Or we see a lot of consolidation and collapse, and things merge together and try to become more of a many-limbed entity that is more broadly appealing. I don't really know which one. I don't think either one is bad or good, but I think we're going to see some growing pains.